As the story begins, we are introduced to Edward during a rehearsal. We learn that he suffers from a facial condition that causes him significant distress and isolation. Despite his dream of becoming an actor, he faces repeated failures in his pursuit of the profession. One day, while riding the subway, he becomes acutely aware of people staring at him, further eroding his self-confidence and mental health. Upon arriving at his apartment, a sense of anticipation stirs within him as he notices a new neighbor moving in next door. The cheerful bustle of unpacking boxes hints at the possibility of fresh connections and stories. Inside his apartment, Edward spots a leak in the ceiling and quickly places a container to catch the dripping water. Just as he resolves one issue, another arises when he accidentally cuts his hand while preparing a meal. Moments later, there's a knock at the door. It's his beautiful new neighbor, who notices his injury and offers to help. As they converse, he learns her name is Ingrid, and she is a playwright. She notices a typewriter in his apartment with a sentence he has written, prompting Edward to share his acting aspirations. Ingrid suggests they might collaborate someday but reveals she is only there to borrow laundry detergent. The next day, Edward visits his doctor, who informs him that his condition is worsening. His eye will soon become debilitating, and minor tumors are enlarging. The doctor offers him an experimental drug that could potentially cure him, but it comes with significant risks. After deliberating, Edward returns home, where he notices Ingrid has painted her front door red. Touched by her creativity, he gifts her his typewriter. When she asks if she needs to pay for it, he simply says, "Just write me a part." Their conversation is cut short by Ingrid's boyfriend arriving. Undeterred by his setbacks, Edward continues auditioning, even as rejection persists. One evening at home, he watches a video highlighting how attractive people tend to find more success in life. Ingrid joins him, and they enjoy each other's company. The next day, Edward decides to proceed with the experimental operation, hoping it will transform his appearance and give him a fresh start. After the surgery, the medical team creates a mask of his face to monitor progress, instructing him to report any unusual side effects. Later, Edward steps out for lunch and notices a happy couple passing by. His attention shifts to a statue of Lincoln, which seems to move as he walks away. Upon returning to his apartment, he finds gifts and a note from Ingrid. As he sits on the couch, he unwraps the bandage on his hand, now fully healed, and notices the leak in his ceiling worsening. That evening, someone mistakenly knocks on his door, intending to visit his neighbor's apartment. Edward learns his neighbor has committed suicide, which deeply unsettles him. Seeking solace, he goes to dinner with Ingrid, and they discuss the incident. The conversation shifts to her playwriting, and she reveals her desire for Edward to star in her first production. During dinner, a stranger waves at Edward, leaving both him and Ingrid puzzled. At home later, Edward notices something falling from the ceiling onto his head. Alarmed, he realizes his face is peeling off in clumps. The doctor reassures him this is part of the healing process and gives him the old mask as a keepsake. Back in his apartment, the peeling intensifies, revealing a completely new face beneath. When Edward washes his face, he finally sees his transformed appearance in the mirror. Feeling renewed, Edward ventures into the city, admiring his new look. He socializes with new friends over drinks and even meets a woman in a restroom. Later that night, he returns to his apartment, where a worker arrives to fix the ceiling. The worker mentions someone else used to live there, but Edward insists he is the current resident. The man notices the old mask, which Edward dismisses as art. The doctor visits Edward's apartment, searching for his patient, who hasn't been in contact for a week. Edward, now fully embodying his new persona, claims to be a family member and says the real Edward has died by suicide. Ingrid overhears this revelation. Having fully reinvented himself, Edward emerges as a confident and charismatic real estate agent, quickly earning admiration from his colleagues. His new appearance and success reshape how people perceive him, allowing him to leave his troubled past behind. As Edward leaves, he notices Ingrid and decides to follow her to the theater. There, he sees a sign indicating that an actor is needed. Inside, he walks into an audition that has just ended. Ingrid notices him and asks if he has come for a role. Excitedly, he accepts the script, feeling a surge of anticipation as he begins to read the lines. He soon realizes the play is Ingrid's first creation, inspired by Edward's life. At his next audition, Edward wears his mask. Before he begins, Ingrid asks about the mask and its origin. He casually explains that it's a prototype for a face, and they continue rehearsing. Together, They recreate a scene from when Ingrid visited him before, and she is thrilled with his performance. Edward, however, continues his web of lies, claiming he had a friend who shared the same condition as her late neighbor. This convinces Ingrid that he is perfect for the role, although she admits she wishes for someone who truly resembles Edward to bring her vision to life. Later, Edward visits Ingrid's apartment, noticing the typewriter he once gave her. She mentions that it doesn't work and she has never used it. They pour drinks, share a dance, and end the evening happily. Edward continues to perform with his mask, impressing everyone. However, during one rehearsal, a man resembling Edward's former self appears. He has heard about the role and believes he is perfect for it, but he soon realizes it's already taken and leaves. Ingrid watches this unfold with intrigue. Another man, Oswald, introduces himself and joins Edward and Ingrid. Over dinner, Oswald praises Edward's masked performance, though Edward's colleagues are surprised, unaware of Edward's involvement in the production. Feeling embarrassed, Edward grows wary of Oswald. The dynamics shift further when Oswald begins spending more time with them. His charming British accent and ideas about Edward's character lead Ingrid to revise parts of her play. They craft a new mask for Edward, but it starts falling apart during rehearsals, forcing him to adjust it constantly. One day, while walking through a park, Edward encounters Oswald, who has just finished yoga. They discuss acting and makeup techniques, but Edward remains uneasy. Later, Oswald takes the stage at karaoke, performing with confidence and captivating the audience, leaving Edward feeling overshadowed. Back at the theater, Ingrid decides to restructure the play. She gives Oswald a larger role, allowing him to perform most of the scenes, with Edward only appearing for the transformation moment. Ingrid also revises the story's ending, removing the suicide theme to make it more uplifting. With the mask and makeup becoming too cumbersome, Edward's transformation is no longer needed. The play now mirrors Beauty and the Beast, with Oswald taking center stage. At the premiere, Oswald's expanded role steals the show, while Edward only appears briefly at the end. Afterward, a man praises Oswald's remarkable performance, leaving Edward in the shadows. The next day, Edward reads a newspaper highlighting Oswald's rising fame, unaware of the bug in his coffee cup, which he accidentally spills. Ingrid continues involving Oswald more and more, deepening Edward's obsession. He begins trailing Oswald and monitoring his every move, slipping into mental instability. Eventually, Edward confronts Ingrid, claiming that Oswald is not sincere and has been hiding the fact that he has a wife and child. Ingrid calmly responds that they are his ex-wife and daughter, with whom he maintains a good relationship. Edward is left shaken, realizing how deeply his obsession has consumed him. To make matters worse, Ingrid announces that Oswald will be moving into the apartment next door to hers, the very place Edward once called home. Left with nothing more to say, Edward immediately enters his old apartment and tears down the ceiling, which had just been repaired since his departure. Afterward, he returns home, takes the mask, and begins mimicking Oswald. He starts wearing the mask everywhere, even at work as a real estate agent. His erratic behavior disturbs his colleagues, creating chaos in the office, which ultimately leads to his dismissal. Desperate and enraged, Edward goes to the play where Oswald is performing. He interrupts the show and attacks Oswald, leading to a confrontation. Edward demands that Oswald remove his mask, insisting there's something hidden beneath it. Oswald defends himself, pushing Edward, which causes the ceiling to collapse and injure Edward. Following this incident, Edward moves in with Ingrid, who takes care of him while he recovers. During this time, he observes their life together, spending moments with Ingrid and Oswald. As time passes, Ingrid becomes pregnant, and their bond grows deeper. One day, they go out together, and a therapist accompanies Edward to offer support. The therapist comments on Ingrid's devotion, wondering how she continues to be there for Edward. Left alone for a moment, Edward suddenly pulls out a knife and attacks the therapist. A struggle ensues, but Edward loses strength and collapses. This violent act lands him in prison. After serving several years, Edward is released. While out on a walk, he notices a poster for Ingrid's play. By coincidence, he runs into Oswald, and the two decide to have lunch together. During the meal, Ingrid joins them and announces that this will be her final play, as she has achieved everything she wanted. She invites Edward to the show, revealing that Oswald will no longer perform. His only role had been Edward, a character Ingrid now forbids from being portrayed. Ingrid also shares that she and Oswald plan to move to Canada next month to start a new life. As they prepare to order food, Edward hesitates, unsure of what to choose. This causes everyone to laugh, and Oswald quips, "Edward hasn't changed at all."